I'm Nicholas Daniel, and you are listening to Legends of Reed.
And welcome back to Legends of Reed. My name is Jo Anne Sukumaran, a personist from Singapore. Welcome to the show, Nicholas. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. It's so nice to meet you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. So lovely to catch up with you this evening.
Finally. I'm sorry it's taken us a while to get to meet, hasn't it? We've been going backwards and forwards for a while, but it's lovely. I've got this little window of time around Christmas I'm able to speak to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so honored to have some time with you.
Not at all. Me too.
I thoroughly enjoyed listening to your latest album, the Schumann Works for Oboe and Piano.
Thank you so much.
And congratulations that it was being named one of the best classical albums of 2024 by BBC Music Magazine.
Yeah, it's, the thing is so many of the recordings I've made have been of pieces that nobody knows, which is, of course, or it's new music. And of course, that's somehow quite releasing to record music that's not very famous. But when you're recording, say, Schumann Fantasiastücke or Adagio and Allegro, or of course, R3 Romanzen, there's a different kind of responsibility and in the preparation, there was strangely a lot of stress. I had a lot of stress about it, sort of nerves about it. But then actually what happened was we got to the recording sessions and we just let it go. And we record very privately in a beautiful studio, which is a barn in the east of England, not far from where Benjamin Britten lived. And we record just with one producer, no engineer. There was actually a piano tuner popping in and out because they're very important. But it's a very private, calm environment. And the producer, Jonathan Cooper, is just absolutely amazing. He's I record for Chandos now, and I'm very happy to be exclusive with them. And they have him as a house producer, so he's on the staff. But I mean, it couldn't be anybody better. He would be my choice even if he wasn't on the staff. He's amazing, so calm, so zen, so patient, and yet absolutely penetrating listening and understanding of the shapes you're trying to make. And also with Julius Drake, who I've played with for many years. My cat just walked in. Hello, baby. Julius and I have played together for so long that Jonathan knew not to get in the way of our own process. So yeah, it was, I'm pleased. Of course, it's a huge delight to have something hit the spot. It's had lovely reviews, which don't really matter, but it's nice to know that somebody's listening.
I noticed this sense of calmness which you talked about in the recording. So could you just tell us, how did you start becoming interested in the oboe and what led you to pursue it professionally?
Well, I mean, I had no idea. I had no idea what an oboe was. My grandmother said the boy must play the oboe. My mother used an exclusive when she said, "What the beep's an oboe?" That's actually true. And I think she'd heard it on a soap opera theme song, Emmerdale. And I mean, it could be I've got all my timings wrong, and that's not true. But my grandmother definitely was the person. I mean, she was a very gentle, calm person, my grandmother, but she was so beloved by all of her grandchildren. It was an amazing thing to be one of her grandchildren. And my mother definitely listened to her advice. And so I'd been playing the piano for a while, which I started because we lived in the country and it was quite easy to do. It sounds a bit upper class, but we weren't like that. But my mother said, "Look, you can learn the piano or you can have horse riding lessons." And the thing is, I was quite scared of horses, and I think my mother knew that. So I don't think she'd have wanted to pay for horse riding lessons. But I mean, I was kind of given the choice, but it was one of those things. I actually hated the piano to start with. I love the piano now. Anyway, so I hated the piano to start with, but I absolutely love it now. And I find playing the piano is, first of all, very relaxing. Secondly, incredibly useful when I'm teaching. And my
Mhm.
students will tell you I play the piano a lot with them in lessons when we're working on things. So I think the less words you can use in teaching, the better. So you can help people find the sort of growth and expansion of a phrase by showing them the space that's possible with the piano rather than saying, why don't you take more time there? Or you could try, or just, show them that. So the piano took off first, and then actually I was singing. The whole basis of my music making in every respect is actually singing because my parents were churchgoers. I was utterly bored by church. And so they said, "Oh dear, Nicky's not enjoying the church." They said, "Perhaps you'd better join the choir." So I joined the choir. And actually, that was like a light went on like that. And then my voice got quite good, and I ended up as a chorister at one of the great cathedrals in the UK, Salisbury Cathedral, which is a fantastically amazing building with the tallest spire in the country, and it was a great choir, 16 boys, which is quite a small number, 6 men, and one of the great buildings of the world, and one of the greatly beautiful buildings made with extraordinary stone, Portland marble. And so that there's a thing about the way that boys' voices, and actually we know now girls' voices, bounce off these special stones, and there's an acoustical interaction between children's voices and this particular stone. Well, all these stones that these buildings are made of. So I think it's a special thing. And one of the lovely things I've been able to do in my career is go back to Salisbury and play as a soloist with my oboe. And I've realized that my oboe playing is an extension of my child's voice, which I know was quite good. I haven't got any recordings of it because it's before those days. But
Mhm.
my child's voice was very flexible, high, extremely high, and just was a thing that enabled me to be musically free at a very young age. I mean, you're
Mhm.
immersed in some of the most serious music ever written by composers. And of course, we were exposed to the very earliest music, so plain song. I can still read plain song now. And then to the most recent music. So I was one of the first composers I ever met, actually Elizabeth McConkie. And Elizabeth McConkie has written a fantastic bassoon concertino.
Mhm.
It's a great piece. Was
Mhm.
a wonderful composer, and I met her again later in life, and she wrote a short piece for me. But we sang a piece of hers, which was Dylan Thomas, a Welsh poet, setting amazing piece called "And Death Shall Have No Dominion," which was hugely stirring. So we were all introduced to her. So I met a living composer. Every time we sang Britten or Walton or Messiaen, and this was in the sort of late 60s, early 70s, because I old. So it was really special. So the first living composer I met, yes, was a woman actually, which is a wonderful thing. So that's how I really got started. And with I played the piano. They said you had to play two instruments to be a chorister at Salisbury, so I took up the oboe to do that. It just so happened that one of the most superb oboe teachers in the country, Irene Pragnell, who's still with us, luckily, happened to be the teacher at that school at that time. And some of your listeners may be aware of the system of associated board exams, of it, the exam structure. So I was I clearly took to it quickly, and within 18 months I'd passed my grade 8 of actually starting. But quite a lot of Irene's students actually at that time were in that situation. There's one great friend of mine, Nigel Shaw, who's a direct contemporary of mine. In fact, no, he's considerably older. He'd hate me saying that. No, he's 6 months older. And he was in the Berlin Philharmonic. He was in the Komische Oper in Berlin. He spent his life living and working in Berlin. And he's another student of Irene's who got on very fast, very quickly. And she just had this way. At one time, all of the students in the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain were her students. And she then became a professor at the Guildhall School, and I've stayed very close to her. And, she's one of the great teachers of the past. She studied with Janet Craxton, and Janet Craxton has been and remains a formative influence on me. So she was somebody who I studied with. Every teacher I ever had was either, apart from one, was either Janet Craxton herself or a student of Janet Craxton's. She was just such a phenomenon. I mean, she was a really crucial influence on me in so many ways, but the most important ways in which she influenced me is about loyalty to the composer and to the text being the first thing that you start with. So you don't work with your feelings, you don't work with your ideas, you work with your knowledge of the style of music you're playing and of what the text actually says. And this, of course, goes right back to the earliest ever music. If you look at Couperin's music, extraordinary pieces we have for oboe, wonderful, at a sort of crucial and important time in the oboe's development. Those pieces are so specifically written about the text, and the text includes, of course, the figured bass, which gives you all of the extremely complex and beautiful harmony which you play with. So I remember one piece that I worked on with her, which was one of the Telemann partitas, B flat partita. I think it's number 1, and this movement that goes da 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 da. It's a beautiful thing. And she played the piano for me, and she described about those 3 repeated Ds. And she said, well, of course, you have to judge them with the acoustic you're playing in. I was like, oh, yeah. And then she said, there is no acoustic in this room, but so you can actually go down quite far with them. She worked with me to tailoring those 3 notes down, but also making like smaller shapes which are inside a bigger shape, which is very much my way with Baroque. There used to be with Baroque performance, there used to be only ever small shapes until people realized that was actually a little bit boring. And so the people playing period instruments now are all kind of doing very different shapes than in the 80s or the 70s when it was first kind of coming through. But she was onto that. But it was always about what the text says and why you respond, why the text says what it says to you, and like putting that first. Those lessons are absolutely the front of what I do as a teacher as well, and in my own practice, in my own work.
Okay. So defending the composer here.
Always. And of course,
Yeah.
Janet Craxton was a founder member of the London Sinfonietta, which is one of the great contemporary music orchestras of the world and remains so now. And she had so many pieces written for her, even by Vaughan Williams. Vaughan Williams wrote the Blake songs, which were tenor and oboe for her. I mean, she worked with composers like Stockhausen, Henzer, Lutosławski, Schnittke. I mean, many of those composers I didn't get to know Stockhausen, but I was in communication with Stockhausen actually after Janet died, and I did a concert, which is part of the archive now at the British Library. Well, I think I played 12 world premieres of pieces that were written in her memory, which was the year after she died. And those composers included Sir Michael Tippett, Peter Maxwell Davies, Harrison Birtwistle, Simon Bainbridge, Colin Matthews, David Matthews, not Elizabeth McConkie, that was for Goossens, but there was the extraordinary Oliver Nuthan wrote an amazing piece for that concert, which was for cor anglais, English horn, uh, and clarinet, which he sent us through the fax machine at 3 o'clock in the morning, the day of the concert,
Oh, wow.
and then rang us up and asked us to play it to him.
Wow. Yeah, because I'm quite curious about this, the rich tradition of the British oboe school, right? Because you had one this, which was the British Oboe Quintets, which I enjoyed a lot, especially the Arnold Baxter's Oboe Quintet. Yeah.
Beautiful piece, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the tradition is strong and has some very interesting links in it. So, for instance, Fischer, who was a very fine oboist of the classical period, he was actually the son-in-law of Gainsborough, the painter. And there's a very famous portrait of him, which Gainsborough made. Gainsborough is one of our very greatest artists, incredible portrait artist. And I've seen that painting, and it's fascinating. Fischer was clearly a great artist, and also was a great composer. And for instance, there are 12 oboe concertos by Fischer in the British Library. So it goes back all the way, I would say, to Handel, who, to start with, of course, imported a Swedish oboist to London to be his first oboe, who was Johann Heinrich Roman, who then went back to Uppsala to become the music director in Sweden. And Fischer wrote some incredible music for the oboe, but also took back with him some important manuscripts which are in the library in Uppsala, including a Handel oboe concerto, which is absolutely astonishing. And the funny thing about that piece is that the second movement of it starts exactly the same as the Marcello oboe concerto, which is exactly the same harmony starting, which of course is a piece that Bach knew and arranged for solo harpsichord, that piece. So it's as if they were kind of communicating with each other about, so Bach said, oh, have a listen to this piece by this guy Marcello, and posted it to him. And but Fischer, so the history of the British school goes back a long way. And of course, it was absolutely revolutionized in the 20th century by Leon Goossens. Where is it?
Oh, you have his
It's,
oboe, right?
yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Ah, I see.
This is, well, actually, I'm incredibly honored to have been given this instrument now. This is Goossens' oboe, and it's 1911. It's still playing absolutely beautifully. It's a thing. It's so light. It feels like to me like a recorder. It's so easy to play. I'll just do a quick pass by of it. There you go.
It's slimmer.
Very slim. Yes. There's much less thick wood in the top joint than we have these days. So I was asked by a very good friend, the conductor Paul McCreesh, who runs a group called Gabrielli and Gabrielli Raw, and Raw is young people's project, which is, I think, one of the most important music projects happening in the UK at the moment. Kids from normal schools being trained and taught to sing highly complex and emotionally strong music, not from fee-paying schools, but from state schools, is where this country has allowed there to be an enormous rundown in uptake. We're living in a sort of difficult time over here at the moment. Anyway, and Paul said to me, look, we're doing a project, and it's called the English Coronation. So basically, an English coronation. So basically, what he did was he took all of the best music written for the crowning of kings and queens in the 20th century, and he put it on a disc, and you can hear that disc. It's an astonishing thing to hear, and I knew Jenny Goossens, and I'd met Leon at the end of his life and done a big Wigmore Hall concert for him, and Jenny very kindly lent me the oboe. And I used it for that project, and something in me just said, "Oh,
Hmm.
I see.
Hmm.
Right." And it was very interesting because actually my ex-wife, Joy Farrell, was also playing on that project, and she was playing an even older clarinet. And I remember I was in the beautiful cathedral, Ely Cathedral, and I was just going for a coffee, and I walked to the back of the cathedral, and she was, as usual, practicing in the orchestra place. And I listened to the way that this thin, close to it, thin sound was transporting itself through the cathedral, which is a huge cathedral, Ely, and how it was getting warmer and darker as it travelled towards me. And I thought, oh my goodness. And I listened to how Goossens' oboe was coming through on the recordings, and I thought, well, that is really interesting. So it had a profound effect on me, and I changed back to Lorre, not because Goossens' oboe is a Lorre, but I changed back to playing Lorre oboes when I found the Étoile oboe, which I think is an extraordinary development in our instrument making history of the oboe. And it really is a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful to Lorre for being tolerant of me leaving and then coming back. But we're very close to the Gordon family, and we travel together quite a lot, Alain and Olivier and I. And basically, I realized I'd just gone up a certain path, and I didn't need to have such a thick, fat sound in order to project in the right way.
Hmm.
So it was very interesting, and it was Goossens' oboe that took me back there. And I'm so grateful because um, Jenny's actually given me the oboe now and bequested it to me, and so it's just an amazing thing to have in my house, and to be able to occasionally play. I don't want to play it too much, and I did take it to Spain once to do Sibelius' Second Symphony, which with the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, because that's a piece that Goossens had played that Sibelius had heard him play on that oboe. And we were doing it in London. They said there's also a date in Madrid, and I was like, wow. And I was worried because it was hot. I thought it might melt. The pads
Oh,
might fall out. I was so worried. So I tried to keep it from getting anywhere too warm. But it
yeah.
was one of those things. So playing that piece on that oboe was fantastic. But then on that disc you mentioned the English oboe quintets. I did actually record on Goossens' oboe. Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't know. Oh,
Yeah, the Delius piece at the end, the two interludes. The cat has returned, and I don't know how he got through the door, but let me pick him up and give him a cuddle. There we go.
oh.
Oh, he's a good boy. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So the Delius pieces, I actually recorded on Goossens' oboe. So you'll have to, I'm afraid you're going to have to go back and have a little listen to that.
Yeah.
Because it's not, I mean, it's not that different sounding, but it definitely is different. And the thing about Goossens' oboe is he played it, apart from a short time when it was stolen and then he got it back, he played it for his whole career from childhood. So all those famous things that happened to him, like becoming the principal oboe in the Queen's Hall Orchestra when he was a teenager, like a young teenager, having only played the oboe for a few years, and all these crazy things that happened to him, incredible pieces written for him, and Vaughan Williams concerto, for instance. I mean, they were all done on that oboe. And so when you play it, it's not as if he's forgotten by the instrument. He's remembered by that instrument. I
Hmm.
think he's honored by that instrument. But, if I'm making a recording, I want to sound like me if possible. So I did the first take as a piece, and we went and listened to it in the box, and I thought, oh dear, hang on, that actually sounds like Goossens. So I said, I just had a quiet word with her. I said, now listen, darling. I said, you and I need to have a little bit more interplay, and you need to. I'm not going to let you forget your daddy, but your new brother is here with you, so please let me in a little bit. So I
Did
kind of,
you? You really
I
had a
had,
chat.
I know, I really did. I honestly
Oh,
did do that. I had a chat. It was like I I need a little bit more of me coming through this because it makes you make his vibrato, which was a very specific sort of vibrato, beautifully diaphragmatic. I think his vibrato. Look at that. Such
uh,
a beautiful boy. Janet Craxton had a big black cat too. That's not why I've got him, but so yeah, the Goossens effect is big, but actually, I think Janet Craxton was as influential a teacher, and actually, Michael Winfield, a very influential teacher in the UK too, taught so many of the great oboists that we still hear playing now, and also Terence McDonough, who taught many great oboists. He was a wonderful player. If you listen to the Beecham recording of the Mozart ballet music, Tamos, I think it's called Tamos of Egypt. There's a wonderful oboe solo played by Terry McDonough, which is just fabulous. And there's other people like Sidney Sutcliffe, Jock Sutcliffe, who was a fantastic player, or Roger Lord. So many of these great players from, after the war, really, when many of them were students of Goossens. Of course, then there's Evelyn Barbaroli, who, I mean, she and Janet Craxton were some of the most important players in the country, and both being women, that's a terrific thing. When women were seen as, at that time, they were seen as literally taking the bread out of men's babies' mouths. And so they would they a woman in the studio or a woman in the orchestra was seen as taking jobs away from the men.
right, right. Oh,
Yeah, so
okay.
they
Now
were
I
see.
get
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So I didn't make that very clear, but I remember Dame Thea King, saying to me once that she was actually told that her being there was taking away work from a man, which was taking away food from his family.
Oh gosh.
And it's a different time. It's a
Yeah.
different time, but
Yeah.
many of those attitudes do still prevail in some places. I mean, actually, I've seen enormous changes, but my own orchestra, Britain Sinfonia, has a massive majority of women. The fact the men's changing rooms often very quiet, which is nice. Because
Okay.
there's so few men in the orchestra and predominantly female wind section as well. We just appointed our first female brass player to who's the principal trumpet, Imogen, and she's fantastic. So there are places in which it's different, but I think at that time, maybe after the Second World War, of course, the thing is we lost so many men in the war. We lost so many people in the First War too. And the majority of them were men in the army, and so there was a space for women to enter the workplace in that way.
Hmm.
But they were not accepted in the same way that the men were. I've read that and seen it, and I saw an extraordinary letter the other day from, I think it was from Adrian Bolt to Janet Craxton's parents, saying, I gather she's decided to become an oboist, and I gather she's going to Paris to study, because she was very young and she went to study at the Paris Conservatoire just after the war, which must have been an incredibly brave thing to do. And he said, I'd have thought she'd be much happier being at home and having a husband and children. I mean, Adrian Bolt said that in a letter to her parents. It's just like, wow. I mean, of course there is a massive amount more to do in terms of equality and in terms of fairness, just simple fairness and level playing field. But I think we perhaps need to acknowledge where we've come in terms of a journey as well. And I know that I'm in a world where I'm surrounded by women musicians, and but actually not in my job in Germany.
Hmm.
And there's very big positive affirmative action steps being taken by German ministries to make sure that women are given a slightly more than equal chance. So, for instance, if you had two people who were within reason scoring, as it were, about equally, and one was a woman and one was a man, the woman would be offered the job. And I think that's perfectly fair. I sit on the Senate in my school in Trossingen in Germany, and there's so many men in that room. And every time a woman speaks, I'm like, oh, what a relief. Because it's like I hate all these men's voices, blah, 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 blah. And then a woman speaks, and I go, oh, there you go. And it's like there's not enough men on that situation, but we haven't got the men in the high tier part of the school. But we're working, like in all the professorships. In the middle tiers, we have got them much more, but the professorships still seem to be very male.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the example I would give you is that we had trumpet and trombone and percussion professorships recently, and I was on the jury for two of those instruments. Trombone, we did have a very good woman applicant, and when she won our job, she was offered 3 jobs at the same time. She didn't take ours. The single woman trumpet applicant, not one. So that is a problem, and that shows that education, the level right at schools, little children, that's where we need to focus our attention. It's something I try to focus my attention on too, certainly in terms of any influence I might have in politics and connections in that way. I try to make sure that people understand we've lost a whole level of people, partly to do with COVID, partly to do with schools not encouraging children to learn music. So it's very sad to see. But it's possible to build it back. It'll just take a couple of generations, that's all.
Yeah, I
So see.
suppose, yeah, COVID was a big hit, yeah,
A
on the
big hit. We
yeah.
lost a lot of professionals. I mean, not to the illness. I mean, but to the economic realities of COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
People just couldn't afford. And if you don't keep practicing, you unless you use it, you lose it.
Yep.
And also, they realised that music is something that you have to be. It's so basically poorly paid for most musicians, the majority of musicians, that you actually have to really love it in order to want to continue doing it. And of course, many of us do love it. And that's a bit like, in a way, I'm not comparing us to nursing, but in a similar way, that people get away with paying nurses so little because nursing is a vocation, a calling. Music is a calling. Acting, which I have an interesting window into with my daughter being an actor, is a calling. And if you think what the richest people who put things on in, say, the world of musical theatre, they're billionaires. And if you think what the average musical theatre, for instance, artist is paid, even at the highest levels, it's astonishing. And there's very few of those are in work at all. Anyway, it's important to stay positive. That's the thing. I'm always a glass half full person. My mother was one of the most positive people you could possibly have met. She was such a sort of clear and positive force, and I really do believe that's an important thing. So we just have to keep, I remember seeing Hillary Clinton talking about being in such a strong situation of power in America when she was, and saying there's so much you can't change, but even a small win needs to be celebrated. So I think that's something I try to and it's a bit like when you practice, you might practice something, and if it improves just a little bit, you have to go, yeah, I'm happy that has improved. I've got all this to do. I've got all this to learn, and I've got a stack of scores lining up I've got to learn for. As soon as Christmas is over, I'm getting back to it, but I've got a whole lot of new pieces to play.
Yeah.
Brand new pieces, yeah. So positive reinforcement.
What do they say? Gradual gains. in the fitness
Exactly.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, absolutely. That's another thing I'm doing in the new year.
Oh.
Let's see.
So you're one of the very you're one of the world's most prominent concert oboe soloists. When did you think you could have such a unique path? What made you go for this path?
Oh, well, I didn't go for it. I mean, it went for me. Um, just behind me on the wall there's a certificate, and that was a competition I won in 1980, which was called BBC Young Musician of the Year. These days it's called BBC Young Musician. And in those days in this country, we had 3 television channels, and it was on the number one channel, BBC One, on a Sunday evening, the very final of it. It was a 6-month process, this competition. And I was lucky enough to win it. And I say lucky because I honestly do believe that any competition is a matter of luck. I had a sort of challenging conversation with one of my students the other day who's become slightly obsessed with competition winning. And I said, you know, it's not up to you if you win, it's up to the jury. And the jury is chosen by someone else. It's a matter of taste and choice. If you happen to win, that's great. Enjoy the money, enjoy any status it gives you, enjoy the
Contracts,
opportunities.
maybe?
Yeah, the
Contract. Yeah.
opportunities
Yeah.
exactly that it
Yeah.
can give you.
Yeah.
That will die off quite quickly. You'll spend the money probably on reed making machine. Quite right too. But I was just so lucky to win it. And it was a competition for all instruments at that time. It still is. And that was that was on television to a huge number of millions. I think 18.5 million or something. So I was instantly a celebrity. I mean, a literal celebrity in terms of being stopped in the street, being interviewed on TV, being
Oh.
oh yeah. I mean, I couldn't walk along in Waterloo Station without people stopping me, and because the thing is with TV is that you're a television that you're actually in someone's living room or in their cafe or their bar, or and so you're really part of their private home life for 25 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is. And it was a really big thing at that time, and that caused some issues. I mean, as a in my family life, I was going through absolute hell because my mother and father were divorcing at the time. My mother was with somebody else, and my father was, I mean, they were both in very difficult places, and I had really no support at home. I was just in between leaving school and starting at the Royal Academy, so I was finishing with one teacher and starting with another. And I mean, I had pretty good sense, I mean, like business sense for some reason, but there were all sorts of things that happened that I should have been protected from, and I shouldn't have done as much as I did. But eventually, Janet Craxton, in one of my first lessons, just said, she had a very low voice. I'm going to imitate her, and it's only in tribute and love. I'd like to see your diary, please. I went, oh, sorry. I'd like to see your diary, please. So I
Oh,
just handed over my little diary.
so serious.
Which, yes, it was, and actually, funnily enough, my husband found that diary the other day, and I was so shocked by what I saw in it. I was really busy. I think I've always just been busy. Anyway, she said to me, "What's this?" And I said, "Oh, that's the Bellini concerto in London. What's this the next night?" I said, "Well, that's Handel's third concerto with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic. How are you getting there?" I said, "Well, I'm getting the night sleeper train, which you could still do in those days, because the trains were quite slow." And she said, "And what's this the next day?" And I said, "Well, that's Vaughan Williams concerto in Suffolk." She said, Liverpool to Suffolk. That's one side of the country to the other. And I said, "Yes, I've got the trains all organised. Here are the bookings." And she said, "You'll be lucky if that works." And so she handed me back my diary and she said, "That's quite enough for now. Don't take any more work until I tell you."
Ooh.
And I said, "Okay." And then she said, right, let's do some Gillet. So we did some Gillet studies, and well, I think one Gillet study, I think one a week's enough. And I walked out of that lesson, and I walked down to Finchley Road to get the bus, and I felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. And I was able to say to people who were phoning me up, saying, "Oh, come and do this concert here. There's no fee, but you'll enjoy it." Or they say, "Come and do this concert here. There's a big fee, and you'll enjoy it." And I was able to say, "I'm really sorry. My professor has said that I can't take any more concerts at the moment. She wants me to focus on my scales and studies and things and my practice." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I literally turned down, and my diary goes from absolute chaos to really just the odd little thing or appointment at the academy. And, then it starts to get more detailed about practicing as I go through, as I started to make notes about how and time organize myself better.
Mm.
I've never been more grateful to anybody than to her for that, because it was something that she saw I needed, because I didn't have much personal calm. And something I've always sought in myself and continue to seek is a tranquility, a basis of calm and peace, so that the music can come to me and I'm calm to try and understand it. And I was perhaps lucky because my mother did take me when I was about 15 to study transcendental meditation, which was very big at that time. I mean, it still is, but it was very big at that time because the Beatles were promoting it. And I started doing that, and it did help me. And but also, when you won a thing like that, it's on TV, and you're going to be interviewed on pop music stations, being asked to do crazy breakfast television stuff. And, you know, it's hard to find the tranquility. So I'm grateful to Janet for many things, but also for helping me find the space to regain that tranquility properly. Yeah, she was amazing.
Oh, what a story. Do you still practice transcendental meditation?
I do. I do.
Oh,
Yeah, I do.
okay.
And I mean, I've developed many different forms of relaxation and meditation with my reading, and I try to bring sort of energetic meditation into my practice as well. And I think what's really interesting is that practice is still, with everything we know, it's still being developed and still being expanded on. Let me show you what I've got on my desk. This fantastic new book by Molly Gabrien, which is called
Ah,
Learn Faster, Perform Better,
mm-hmm,
Musician's Guide to the Neuroscience of Practicing. And I've learned a lot from Ms. Gabrien.
mm-hmm.
Um, and it's been really interesting. I mean, I've used some of her techniques that she's talking about. I've used them for a long time, like the idea of practicing and then resting, micro resting. But there's more in that, and much of it comes from sports research in the States, from because they've got I mean, like 80 years of sports research which they're using. You probably know about this from your own work, but I've certainly been able to incorporate some of her ideas. I'm very grateful to her, actually, and to Jackie Leclerc in Montreal, who also pointed me towards her. Jackie's very interesting, open-minded person in our double reed world.
Mm-hmm.
Very generous as well, very generous with her sort of sharing of things she discovers. I love that I mean, that's a very good academic way. You share information, and that's what it should be. There's too much sort of secrecy about what good practicing means, I think, and sort of guru teachers making it. As soon as I find something that works in my own practice, I instantly want to share it with my students. And they'll tell you that sometimes I come to teach and I'll say, "Oh, I want to try something," and they go, "Oh no, what's this now?" Or else they go, "Okay, yeah, show us." So it's interesting, but that for me, finding a mindfulness in practice it took some time. But in my own meditation, I've also expanded to try and use different things and to use more, not a personalized mantra, for instance, a mantra being a word you repeat to focus your attention as you relax. think that's a basic, rather poor way of describing it, but
I think I know what you mean,
like
like a
Om,
yeah, or
OA,
Satnam or something,
yes,
right?
those
Something,
things,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And of course, for some people who are Christian religious, those things can be problematic. One of my students went to Bangkok, and I said, "Oh, you must go and see the Golden Buddha," and they were like, "Oh no, I couldn't do that because it's a different." Anyway, that was a sort of unusual discussion, but I think that sometimes, like I've noticed that Christian churches, for instance, in this country, are more open now to having yoga on their premises in the church hall, for instance. They
Yeah.
used to be not very open to that, and I think that's a shame. I think we all have something we can learn. All religions and all faiths come from the same basic idea. And I think that we can learn something from each other. And I noticed that also, for instance, I've seen in the Christian teachings, I'm not Christian anymore, but actually they suggest mindfulness and then prayer. Now, I find that very interesting that the Christian teaching is suggesting mindfulness and then prayer, because mindfulness takes you to a place of stillness, and then prayer is what you need to do. For me, the meditation is the action. For me, the meditation is the passive goal, and it's the space when I try to get myself in a place when that can feed through to the rest of my day. I'm not very good at it. I hope to get better. It's only
Uh,
been 50 years, so I have plenty of time left yet to get better at it.
although when I played for the Dutch player Bram, he got me to take up Vipassana meditation.
Oh, really? It's a
Yeah.
very, very dear friend and colleague of mine,
Uh,
and
yeah.
I'll never forget the first time I played with him. It was like somebody plugged us both into the electric socket. It was just amazing.
Electric.
It's like boom, like that. We were in a tiny room, and we both looked at each other and went, "Well, that feels good."
Yeah, he's like, you need to take up meditation. It's
I try to
yeah.
find the right ways for my students to find that tranquility in themselves. Yeah, I think it's really important. Well, it is for me. It might work for a lot of people. It doesn't work for everybody, but I think it can really help. Yeah.
Okay, so for example, when you're preparing for a specific concerto performance, how do you work at arriving at the ideal interpretation? I think you mentioned in one of your videos that you have a three-dimensional performance
Yeah,
method.
I
Yeah.
think that I'm sure that all of us want to be at least three-dimensional in our performances. Ideally four-dimensional. Well, in terms, I mean, actually, funnily enough, I had an interesting experience last year because I'm constantly playing. I'm constantly playing new music. So music that's new to me or newly written, because that's something that really matters to me, because it matters as a legacy for my instrument. It matters that when I'm no longer playing, that there's music for my wonderful students and other wonderful players to play. And there is a massive, and I'm happy to say very exciting group of pieces, actually probably 200, I should think, of pieces in lots of different genres that I have given first performances of and that have been written for me. But there was a particular thing that happened this year. So I was asked about a year ago to learn Bruno Maderna Third Concerto, and I thought, oh yeah, well I've played that, so I said yes. And I knew it was the Barbican. I knew it was a live broadcast. I knew it was BBC Symphony. Barbican's one of our biggest concert halls in London. So I was like, that's great. So I know when that kind of thing happens that my preparation has to be quite extreme. So I have to pace it. I have the right time to learn it. And I started. I mean, it was very short notice booking because we've had lots of ups and downs in the arts in this country, and things that are kind of a little bit later booking than they used to be. And so it was probably only 4 or 5 months I had to between being asked and actually learning it. then they sent me the score, and I looked at it and I thought, oh no, that's not the one I played. And it was much harder than the one I've played.
Oh,
So
golly.
I thought, oh goodness me. Anyway, so I thought, okay, well, I'm 62 now, so let's just see what I've learned over the years about preparation. So I started learning, and it just happened at that time that Jackie Little told me about Molly Gabrien's website, and it was before the book. I literally arrived yesterday. The book's only just published. So I actually, at the beginning of my first day of practicing of the Moderna, I sat down and I watched all of Molly Gabrien's videos. It took all day and a part of the next day. I did do some practice as well. And I started to adapt what she'd said into the way I know it works for me. And funnily enough, after the first day of practice, I went to bed with, first of all, brain tiredness as if the brain was a muscle. I was exhausted, and in a different way, a very different way. I think it was all the neurotransmitters and receivers all doing things, in a very efficient way. And I also had huge chunks of it in my mind from memory. And I don't play from memory until I've played a piece maybe 4 or 5 times. So actually having chunks of it and I can instantly summon it now. If I think about different, I can hear it at the right pitch and I can feel it where it is in my hands. I thought this is really interesting. So I learned that piece in a slightly different way, using more micro breaks, using all the rhythms and windows that I normally do, but using more of her techniques and also practicing without blowing sometimes, practicing in your head, mental practice, which I've never kind of quite got to be one of my things, but it really is now. Anyway, the piece seemed to go in very quickly, and I kept thinking, oh goodness, am I really ready for this? I have not done the normal preparation I would do. And after so many years of learning new music, you have a system, and then that system gives you confidence, because after a while, you kind of get the idea that if you do that and it goes okay, and it regularly does luckily go okay, there's a good chance you won't mess it up. Actually, there is a good chance, and there's always risk. And you have to take risks, and you have to take musical risks, but they lead to technical risks, because musical risks are technical risks. But this, I got to the first rehearsal, and I thought, my goodness, I'm absolutely off the page. I know this piece. It's inside me. It was brand new to me, and actually, it really did go very well. So I thought, okay, well, that's very interesting, because I feel as if I've been able to be even more authentic with this piece. And the thing about that piece is that it's part improvisation as well. And I consulted Heinz Holliger about it, because he performed it and recorded it. And I noticed that almost everything he plays is not written in the score.
Is it?
And he added so much improvisation to it, that because he is, of course, a composer, which I am definitely not. That's not one of my skills. One part of my skill set. Improvising part, it is. Yes, it is. I used to think it wasn't, but it is. So I started improvising and kept changing things about it. But the conductor really worked, Martin Brammes worked wonderfully with me with that piece. So basically, so often what happens to me is I'm asked to do something, and it's for the first time, or it's newly written. And so I know that means my preparation has to be absolutely there, not there, so that I can feel free on stage. If I'm not playing from memory, I'm off the page, referring to it as an aide memoire rather than, reading it. And there's been so many occasions when I've shown myself that I can do that. But now, with the help of Molly Gabrien, I'm even freer and I'm enjoying life even more. So I'm so grateful.
Wow.
I think it's great. I think if you don't keep learning, what's the point of life? I mean, there's so much I don't know. And there are so many people who know so much more than me about certain areas. I had a long email yesterday from Omar Zoboli, the oboist, who's been running a Pasculi seminar. And actually, a big part of this Pasculi seminar was about freedom in performance in the late Romantic period. And he'd sent a whole list of links, and I sat down and started listening to them. And so one of them was Leschetizky playing a Chopin nocturne, and it was just revelatory. And so I think that all the time, particularly with new developments in the instrument, like the way we can use new technology, pedaling, you know, interacting with computers, and also going right back to instruments that are similar to the ones that we used when they were written in the Baroque time, classical, romantic, mid-romantic, late romantic, early 20th century. So I think there's always things that can inform us and things that constantly remind us that we may think we know something, but we basically know very little. It's such a broad world, our world, isn't it? There's so much we can learn. I think that's a wonderful thing. It's also, to me, it's important just to stay curious and to stay enthusiastic, actually. So being, for instance, with my friend Sandro Caldini, who's professor in Udine, who's a wonderful artist and fantastic musician, but also I call him the mole because you know what a mole is. Do you have?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, little
yes.
creature, blue creature. They don't have them in every country in the world, and I sometimes say the word mole, and they go, "What is mole?" But he's like a mole. He's the one who found that Handel C minor oboe concerto, and he's found so many great pieces. She's the one who discovered the final version of the Poulenc trio with oboe bassoon piano. You know that, come
Yeah,
across that
yeah,
version. And of
yeah.
course, that's crucial that we have Poulenc's final thoughts on what he wanted his trio to be.
So
And
he found it, huh?
he's the one who found it, and he's the one who spent 1,000 hours or more editing it to be
Oh,
what Poulenc exactly wrote. I mean, that was a labor of love, I can tell you, because that was an enormous. The changes between the old version and the new version are huge. Have you played the new version?
I don't think so.
You must have a look at it. You must have a look
Okay.
because it's
Yeah.
much better for the bassoon,
Oh,
much better. All
huh.
the left hand places where so often the bassoon and the left hand are mixed up, they're all thinned out in the harmony. The
Huh.
bassoon's got more actual material, some material taken from the oboe part. You
Oh,
hear the bassoon so much more. And my great friend Amy Harmon, who I play a lot with, and if you know Amy, she's the first ever woman bassoon professor in Germany.
yeah,
And
podcast. Yeah,
oh, was she?
yeah,
Then
yeah,
your
yeah,
listeners
yeah,
and watchers know how well.
yeah.
I mean, she's a wonderful player
Yeah.
and a great friend. And she said she never wants to play the old version again.
Oh,
She loves it.
oh,
Yeah,
I see.
took a bit of convincing and it takes some convincing of people because everybody loves that piece because it's such a super little piece, and they get a bit. I suppose their DNA becomes fused with the version they know if they learn it when they're young, and it's hard to change. But I think it's really important. Poulenc made it absolutely clear. Brouillon définitive, the definitive edition, he said. It's pretty clear that's what he wanted. So there we go.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. And that book that you mentioned just now, right? Yeah.
Learn faster, perform better. A
Learn faster,
musician's
perform
guide.
better.
A musician's guide to the neuroscience of practicing. That's the important thing. It's actually scientific, and therefore it's based on solid science. Yeah.
Mm,
Molly Gabrien. She's a
okay.
viola player. She's a
I'll
professor.
definitely check it out then. Okay, so I was wondering, do you also have some tips on how to improve breathing? Especially,
Breathing.
yeah, any breathing exercises that you
Yeah,
practice?
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that breathing is best done and taught specifically rather automatically. And with as few words as possible, as few instructions. And teachers, I'm always aware that the words you use have incredible potency and power in every respect, but also particularly when you're trying to improve someone's understanding of their breathing. I would say that the best exercise that I can teach is one where it's a well-known exercise, but you exhale completely. And then you actually try not to breathe in. You just literally open the airway. So and when I'm teaching it, I look for that sound. It's not taking in a breath. It's just because the thing is that the body knows how to do it. The body is absolutely conditioned to breathe well. And if we have too many voices in our head from people saying, oh, suck in here, pull in here, push out here, don't think that, think this, your body. So I think finding the trust of your breathing again is I think, really good. And also, I think that after you've got somebody to feel where their body moves, to get them to remember that feeling, because the number of breaths you take, well, the oboe, it's a weird thing, the oboe with breathing. It's so different to the bassoon or the clarinet or the flute because we use so little air. But when you get used to the feeling of your body actually opening in the right places, which is not really where you think it's going to be, where a lot of people think it's going to be somewhere else. I think it's going to be up here, but so often the places that need to move downwards and outwards in order for the lungs to fill. And also for the lungs to fill right up to the top of the lungs up here. So, I mean, that often is, people say, oh, breathe low. But I mean, what does it mean? The words can be so useless. So another thing I do is I use a big inflatable bathing ball.
Oh.
So that's where I got it from. I think it's a gymnastic ball. And I make my students, and I have two in the studio, and I make them lie with their stomach right on it, supporting themselves with their hands and a little bit with their toes, so that the main weight of their body is on the stomach. And then we just spend some minutes there with them breathing. And of course, if the ball's not too hard, not too inflated, you can actually feel the ball as you start to breathe. You feel the ball move underneath you. And and it's important to do that with the stomach down first, so face down, and then to do it face up, so that you can also start to feel the back expanding and relaxing into the ball like that. So often, I think this, it's difficult because, of course, fitness matters, and aerobic fitness matters, physical fitness matters, but increasingly, I'm seeing young male students, particularly, come with armor rather than a body that's soft and ready to breathe. And of course, that armor, I'm talking about musculature, abs, as it's known, and women are increasingly getting into muscle fitness too. That armor is not only physical, it's also emotional, and it also, so I would say, I've had this with quite a lot of particularly male students, that they'll develop very strong abdominal muscles which are completely inflexible. They may look great, I haven't seen them, but they clearly enjoy the musculature. But the fact is that they're not flexible, they're not actually able to breathe in the right way. So, in fact, I always say to my students, I now ask my students if they're working out and what kind of exercises they're doing. And I ask them to include flexibility and stretching into their workouts. And any good personal trainer will tell you that the warming up and the flexibility side of it is as important as the actual muscle building. My husband is a big gym freak, and his personal trainer is very hot on this, which drives my husband a bit mad because he spends at least 15 minutes of an hour warming up and doing flexibility. But it's really important for breathing. So I would say that is also good tea. I mean, in the end, I think with the oboe, that not over breathing is important. So taking the right sort of amount of air, an air that enables you to be flexible and free rather than overfilling, because we're never going to use all of that air, and yet the body needs to be flexible in order to breathe well. And I always like to say the air has to hit a soft body as it comes in. And also I very much like the idea that the air is a partner, and your body and your air are working in partnership to make the sound. And so that's a sort of thinking about the air as a part of the process. I mean, it's a bit the same as actually thinking of the wood of the instrument as something that was growing in the ground. I remember the first time anybody said, "Look down at your oboe." And I said, "What do you see?" I said, "Silver buttons, potential hell, potential heaven." And they said, "No, you're looking at a tree." And I went, "Oh my goodness." That was the beginning of a whole exploration and a whole discovery of fairly traded wood, supported by the Forestry Stewardship Council and working with a charity in Tanzania all about the wood of the instruments we play. And so that's another subject, but we can go into that if you like. But understanding that the body is part of a partnership with the breath is good, I think.
I remember
What
a
do you
fourth
say?
player was talking about it, that he said that he was working out so much and he was getting all these abs, right? But then he said that at the end of the day he's a musician, not a model. So and then he needed to breathe. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got a
Yeah.
friend in Hawaii, Alex Hayashi, who's an oboist too.
Yeah.
He's doing quite interesting work on developing muscles, core strength, but also doing it in a way that doesn't hurt oboe playing or wind playing. And I think he's got some quite interesting ideas actually. And I think it is a subject, but it's a tough world out there, and it's been like that for women for a very long time, about how you're supposed to look, men deciding how women are supposed to look, and there's this size and there's this size. And people look at Marilyn Monroe now, who was a famous beauty, and they
Yeah.
say, well, oh, she's fat. No. It's like, well, compared to modern day, what they even describe models as having heroin chic, because they look like
Oh.
heroin addicts because their
Oh.
cheekbones and their hip bones are just sticking out. It's a bit different with boys, and it's more to do with muscles and Aquaman and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they might be amused to see how Aquaman looks between movies, because I've actually seen that. Not the same as in the movies. And these people, these actors, go through extraordinary lengths. And also, to get those kind of muscles looking like that, you have to dehydrate. Do you know that? You have to
Yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
dehydrate.
That's what boxers do before they do the weigh-ins,
In the
right?
weigh-in, you're
Yeah,
right.
they have to
And
drop weight. Yeah.
dehydration is not the friend of wind playing, because you have to have the mucous membranes be hydrated. Otherwise, it's really problematic. Hydration is interesting. I mean, earlier I said water was an overrated liquid just because it's Christmas time. But no, I discovered, because my school in Germany is quite high. It's not Aspen high or something, but it's like getting on for 1,000 meters, which is quite high. And so, in fact, the higher you are, the more you have to hydrate, because the more your body uses the oxygen that's in the air. And it took me quite a while when I started teaching there some 22 years ago to realize that I was getting headaches because I simply wasn't taking in enough water. It's the same when I go to California, because Santa Barbara, where we do most of our rehearsals, is actually a desert climate. So it's quite cold at night. And you have to increase, and you suddenly realize by the time you realize you're thirsty, you're actually dehydrated. So you have to proactively take on board water. Anyway, yes.
Okay, that's very interesting. So, who are some of your favorite composers? Are there some composers that you feel especially connected to as an oboist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bach. He's my central religious figure. Schumann, Bach, Schumann. I know as you said, released a disc of Schumann and Clara Schumann as well. But I think Schumann was, in a certain kind of way, a composer with several layers of skin missing. So the sensitivity in him, I mean, of course, sensitivity to text in his lieder, in his songs, is partly it, but sensitivity to harmony, to the moment. These extraordinary 3-minute long movements he wrote, so many of them in A minor. And it's a phenomenon. But of course, I would say that the composers that are closest to my heart, apart from the dead ones, are composers such as Lutosławski sadly is dead, but Lutosławski, maybe James Macmillan. Thea Musgrave is incredibly close to me. Thea Musgrave is very close to me because she's a very dear friend, but also because she's written a series of pieces for me which are now part of the canon, I think really relevant pieces. And much played, actually, I'm happy to say.
Yeah, I saw them. You perform a piece in a church, right, in New York. Um,
I did. I played some music of hers in New York on her 90th birthday concert. She's now 96. And she's just finished her most recent piece for me, which is a piece for oboe, violin, and large orchestra, which I'm doing a studio concert with the BBC Symphony in February. And it's a fantastic piece. It's all about Queen Elizabeth II, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, and about the fact that Thea and I both met her and had extraordinary experiences with the Queen. It's just seems like a funny thing. I can't quite imagine myself being able to say that, but it actually is just the truth. But that
wow.
piece is going to be really special. But Thea is just such a special composer, and I mean, her means of expression are very often using octatonic scales, and I think you could say she's pretty much obsessed with them, actually. I mean, a lot of composers of the last 100 years have been slightly obsessed with octatonic scales. So that's not is tone, semitone, tone, semitone, or semitone, tone, semitone, tone. And it gives you lots of options. So it gives you a sort of lots of possibilities in terms of chords. And her language is basically fairly tonal, I would say, but definitely spicy. So
Oh,
she's written an incredible number of pieces for me, and I'm so proud to be playing a new one. And also, I would say I can't say too much, but you should watch the Musgrave Space if you're a bassoonist as well.
so how did you meet her? I mean, how did you meet Tia to begin with?
It's a lovely story. I have to try and keep these stories short, or else we'll be here for days. But basically, Sir Peter Maxwell Davies, the great composer, lived on the Scottish island of Orkney, and there's a wonderful festival, St Magnus Festival, which
Yeah,
he founded.
yeah.
And he rang me up one day and said, Nick, I want to commission a concerto for you. And I said, Max, that's fantastic. I said, why don't you write it? He says, no, I decided it's got to be by a senior generation Scottish female composer. And I was like, well, there's only really two that I could think of at that time. One was Judith Weir and one was Thea Musgrave. And I knew that Thea Musgrave was penciled to write a concerto for what was then the Isle of Wight oboe competition, which later became the Isle of Man competition, which later became the Barbaroli oboe competition, which actually we're going to start again, now having had a pause for COVID. And I knew they'd asked her to write a piece for that. And I thought, and then I've got this wonderful composer, John McCabe, this fantastic composer, who really wanted to write me a concerto. He'd written me an oboe and clarinet concerto, which is a superb piece. And I thought, I wonder if I can do something cheeky here. I can't believe I did this. So I rang up Thea and I said, hey, Thea, it's Nick Daniel here, and I've got this idea, and Max wants to commission this concerto. And I said, how do you feel about writing it for me instead and doing it in Scotland? She said, well, if the Isle of Wight, if Evelyn's okay with that, sure. And so I rang John McCabe and said, how do you feel about writing an oboe concerto for a competition? Then I rang Evelyn Barbaroli and I said, look, we have a chance to get not just one new oboe concerto written, but two. If you accept having John McCabe be the composer for the competition and Thea Musgrave, the composer for me. And she said, sure, let's do that. So that's how it came about. And that was the piece Helios. And I remember the first time I met her, it was at Heathrow Airport, and she was flying out, and we sat down together, and she showed me the first of many sketches that she's written. So what she does is she makes a sort of painting, and it's got all of the shapes, the structure, sometimes even the instrumentation, none of the notes, but it's also got the dramatic sort of shape of the piece, and if there's a dramatic actual theme inside it, it's got that too.
So you met here at the airport.
Heathrow Airport.
Yeah, Heathrow Airport.
We met at Heathrow Airport. She showed me the sketch. She told me about what it was going to entail, and I was so excited. And then she sent it to me, and we first performed it in a cinema building in a force 10 gale, which is like a hurricane almost in Orkney in the middle of the summer, and it was very extraordinary experience, a very theatrical piece with a lot of movement, a lot of standing up and sitting down for members of the orchestra, and it was incredible to do that. And then she's continued writing pieces for me, and that's a body of work that I'm incredibly proud of. She's definitely one of my favorite composers. I mean, I was in touch with James Macmillan actually yesterday because he wrote me the most wonderful concerto. There's so many composers who've written for me that I consider friends: John Woolrich, Helen Grime, Hugh Watkins, young and old, male and female, non-binary. It's just a sort of huge privilege to play new music. So basically, I would say that my favorite composers are so often ones who I've got to know from playing their music, and what a privilege that is, and what a thing to be able to give future generations of oboists. I consider that my legacy, and the most important thing I do, second perhaps to teaching, because that's all part of it too. So the teaching and producing and developing people's talents so that they can play some of those pieces is great. Of course, one of the great composers who wrote for me is John Taverner, and he sadly is not with us anymore, but he wrote two very big pieces for me. And he was such a special composer because he's a composer who dealt with the world of the spirit in many ways, and the world of finding a space of tranquility and calm inside yourself, which, as we've discussed, appeals to me very strongly. And his music is the most physical thing I've ever had to play. So it's very hard to find tranquility in it, but you can do it. And the music does help you do that, even though it's incredibly physically challenging. So the Kaleidoscopes piece he wrote for me, which is 45 minutes long, is with 4 string quartets, 2 double basses and Tibetan temple bowls. And it has the 4 string quartets face you and you're in the middle of them. And it's just enormously challenging, but incredibly good. I think I'm still the only person who's actually played it, because it's just crazy hard. And he kind of knew my playing, well, he did know my playing very well by then. He kind of wrote to my strengths, which is extreme melodic achievement in the highest register, sustaining power, projecting a soloistic sound, and also a sort of ability to hold an audience, which I think are probably my strengths. Some of my strengths I've realized over the years. You never quite know, but I think that's probably true. And so he wrote to those strengths astonishingly, and I'm so grateful to him that he did that. Of course, he wrote with no consultation whatsoever, and so the pieces would just arrive, and I would look at them going, "Oh my very goodness, how am I going to play this?" Yeah.
Oh, do you have some? I mean, you have so much experience working with composers. Do you have some tips on how to collaborate with them? You know,
Never say no.
never say no. Oh, it's like improv.
Mm, yeah, right.
Yeah,
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 exactly that. It's that film, Never
yeah.
Say No, isn't it? No, is that, of course, that is improv. Yeah. I do think that sometimes a composer will write something and they'll ask you if it's okay. And it might feel awkward, it might feel difficult. I mean, if I'd seriously gone back to John Tavener and said, I have absolutely no idea how to play this, which was the truth to start with, and particularly the first piece he sent me, which is all with microtonal inflections in the highest register and uh, based on Byzantine chant. And it just came to the letterbox, and I had no idea it was even coming. It was a commission for a festival, but it was something that I'd asked for. But if I'd said I can't play this, he would have lost confidence in me, in the instrument, in the whole process. So I just think find a way, and if you can't do it, if even if in the performance it still doesn't always work, there probably will come an oboist after you who will be able to do it. So I always think, I hear the general standard. I mean, Heinz Holliger said this to me the other day. He thinks that there's never been a higher standard of general oboe playing in the world than there is right now. And I think that is definitely true. And I think it's fascinating. So I really hope that pieces like the Taverner piece will be taken up by people. The Macmillan Concerto has been taken up by a few different people, which is wonderful. I'm so happy to see that. But it's like, don't say no. And also, be their friend. Be the friend of the composer, because they may not want you to be their friend, but they may not need you to be. But mostly, in my experience, they do. It's a lonely process. It's a bit like being a tapestry artist. Each note has to be written either with a computer stroke or a stroke of a pen. That's true from time immemorial. And it's a lonely process of sitting there stitching away this concept you have in your head, getting it from here, from the inspiration, whatever that is, to here, to the page or to the digital screen. So they often enjoy interacting with artists, composers, in my experience. But you have to know the sort of the line. There's a line with every composer. If you go too far into complimenting them or too far into
Right. Oh,
yeah, or it's interfering in a way. I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
Oliver Nutton, who's a composer I was very fond of, and who did write for me, as I've said, and who I think was one of our greatest composers, amazing composer. He When he wrote his horn concerto, which was for Barry Tuckwell, I just loved it so much. I mean, I couldn't understand it to start with because it was so much more tonal than anything he'd written before. So I said, "Oh, Ollie, I just love the horn concerto." He looked a bit uncomfortable. He said, "Now look, Nick." I said, "Yeah." He said, "When you like a piece, this is what you say." I said, "Okay, tell me." I just want to know. He said, "Ollie, horn concerto, liked it." So I would occasionally write him a note or an email or a text message. "Ollie, oh, Hototojisu, liked it." So I was like, I cannot believe I love this piece so much. I'm so crazy. And I have to write, liked it. And I asked him about why he'd written such a tonal piece for the horn, as a horn concerto. Now it doesn't seem quite like that, but he said, well, Barry wouldn't have liked it if I'd written anything too, not tonal, atonal.
Atonal.
The opposite of his tonal was atonal, because he never was atonal, but
Uh,
not if he hadn't written something so tonal.
uh,
And he said Barry wouldn't have liked it. He wanted Barry to like it. I thought that was very interesting. It was very telling. And Ollie's someone who needed lots of support from people around him, actually, in many ways. And he was, of course, a terrifically great conductor, too. So fascinating. But so I would say never say no until at least you've performed it once. And then if there's something that's really awkward, you can perhaps tell them. But even then, I think there's only 2 occasions in hundreds of pieces of new music that I've asked a composer to change something. And actually, my husband did it once because he didn't agree with the ending of a piece. He's not a musician at all. I was so shocked the composer agreed. Now, I got Thea Musgrave to change the ending of her Two's Company percussion and oboe concerto because it just didn't feel as if it quite summed up the piece in the way that the piece felt to me. So I said, look, you might feel that it's finished, but do you want a piece with big flair at the end? And she said, yeah, that's what I thought I'd written. I said, well, you check it and see if you think that's what you'd written. And she changed the ending, added about 2 or 3 measures. Did the same with David Matthews' absolutely beautiful oboe concerto, which I really love. I said, it just needs a little bit more at the end. And because it's a substantial piece. That's the only 2 times in hundreds of pieces and decades of playing music that I've had a composer change any part of a piece. I just think it's our job to get on and do what they wrote. Generally, they know what they're doing better than we do. Sometimes they have a better idea of who we are and what we can do than we have ourselves. I mean, John Woolrich, like John Taverner, started to write in the extreme upper register in a very specific, expressive way for me. And I just thought, well, actually, I would love people to go and listen on Spotify or whatever platform to John Woolrich's oboe concerto, which does use the high register in an absolutely magical way. And so I think sometimes the composers know more than we know ourselves about what we're capable of. We should trust them.
wow. Oh, I've never thought about it in that way. Yeah. Yeah. So they know more than us about us.
Could be.
Yeah.
Most of the time I found that to be true. Yeah.
Okay. So I know that we kind of the interview is quite lengthy now, so I'll just move along. I'm the musical director of the Leicester International Music Festival
Yeah.
and Orion Orchestra, right?
Yeah.
And you also work as a conductor. My question is, so when you are artistic director of ensemble or orchestra, how do you strike the balance between providing leadership but encouraging input from the players? Yeah.
Very fine balancing act. And I think that the way I've come to do it as I do is from chamber music. So in a chamber music, when you're working on a chamber music piece, there's always something to learn from somebody else. And at the same time, about certain aspects of it, you might have an understanding or an experience of a piece that is something that somebody else in the group doesn't understand yet. So finding ways to, in a collegial way, to get people to understand your point of view comes from chamber music. Now that is extrapolated to quite an extreme form in conducting, but at the same time, encouraging interactions from the orchestra can be a slightly slippery slope, because if you sort of lose the basic authority of being the one who has to actually put the beat down, that is a problem. So at the same time, I think that if you listen enough to what people have got, and very often, particularly with very fine professional orchestras, those players will have played the pieces more times than you've conducted them. So you have to understand that they may bring things to the game, to the party, that you could learn from. And that's very often true. And at the same time, if you see or hear a player doing maybe a solo in a way that slightly underestimates or exaggerates its importance in the overall structure, because the one thing that most musicians can't do is see the whole pattern from the whole architecture from the beginning to the very end of a piece, and then the pattern of how that piece fits into a program, for instance. They may or they may not, but if they're performing a piece in a way that understates a certain aspect or overstates it, you can explain that to them and you can say, the way that fits into the structure is that it's built like a bridge, and this has to be the right shaped arch. At the moment your arch is going down or your arch is going too far up, it's too sharp an incline for the listener to get across, people will respect that. And if you have a concept, your job as a conductor is to understand the concept of the architecture, to see and to shape the sound, to find the sound of that piece. I mean, it's something we do as wind players a lot is change the sound to do with what style we're playing, change the style to do with what the composer's intentions are. But with a whole group of players, that's got to be something that's part of who you are as a conductor. And I also like very much to think about the conductor in a way as a prism. So the sort of massive rainbow of beauty is coming to the conductor. I mean, they're playing for the audience, but it's coming to you as the sort of focus of the rhythm. And then you're sending that out through you. So you're sort of like a junction point between the players and the audience. And the players are playing to the audience, but at the same time, they're also playing to you. So you have to be very open in your back as well as in your body and in your mind. But you also have to have some protection, because sometimes there's all sorts of different personalities in every orchestra. And sometimes somebody may have had a bad day. They may be feeling negative about themselves, about life, about music. They may not like a piece. They may not like you. That's got to be fine. So you have to have a sort of membrane of and that's something that's taken me a long time to develop, is a membrane of protection that allows all the good stuff out, all the good stuff in, and bounces away anything negative. And that's ongoing work. I said to someone the other day, I would rather have a life of extreme beauty and understanding beauty and emotion and vibrancy than a life where I'm protecting myself from any kind of negativity so much that I lose the three-dimensional quality of what music means to me and what I want to share. So yeah, it's an interesting journey. I mean, I've never been one to sort of employ PR people and push it, because also I've got such a fascinating career, which is so enjoyable. But as I suppose, over the next 10, 15 years, as my playing may change. At the moment, it feels as strong in many ways, as stronger than it's ever felt. But that probably will change. Maybe the conducting will just sort of come alongside more. But what I'm loving doing is working with young people. So I have two projects where I work with young artists, mostly just leading university level, which is Orion Orchestra. And there's also Triorca Orchestra, which is young players at different stages. Some of them are still at school, some of them are a little bit older. But it's a sort of pan-European project. And of course, living in Brexit Britain and being German and being a German professor, I'm incredibly aware of what we've lost in this country from Brexit, which I would describe as the single greatest act of self-harm a country has inflicted on itself since the Second World War. It's a nightmare. I don't want to go into it because it's too painful and long-winded, but it is so that is very important, and bringing young British people back into the European fold in that way is very important. So I'm loving doing that, and also it means that I can learn new scores, have enough rehearsal time, I can bring that to the profession, having had a bit more rehearsal time than I might do in a professional orchestra setup. So, when you've got to do a Brahms symphony or a Beethoven symphony, we have no Brahms sonatas, no Brahms concerto, no Beethoven concerto, sadly lost. Those pieces are a massive responsibility, and the sort of legacy of people who've interpreted them is so weighty. But in the end, I do what Janet Claxton said, and you go to the text first. And that's a very interesting thing, because so many conductors don't seem to bother with the text at all. Yeah.
I see. Wow. Yeah, I mean, you do so much. I think. Yeah, I see. So, how about doing the rapid fire questions?
Sure. Go
Just
for
to
it.
change things up.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Favorite TV show?
Oh, absolutely fabulous.
Oh, okay. Mozart or Strauss?
Mozart.
Favorite concert hall?
There have to be three, I'm afraid.
Oh.
So most recently, Wuhan, absolutely fantastic hall. Wigmore Hall in London, and the music hall of the Liszt Academy in Budapest.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Summer or winter?
Summer.
City or countryside?
Countryside.
Okay. Favorite Harry Potter character?
We don't talk about Harry Potter in this house.
Oh, okay.
No, seriously, I think J.K. Rowling has ruined her legacy with her anti-trans stance. I can't support it. We won't talk about it.
Next.
You can say that. I'm happy for that to go on the podcast.
Okay. Any favorite Christmas traditions?
Yes. So, having a Polish husband and a rainbow family, we invite my ex-wife and, of course, my children and any of their partners to Christmas on the 24th of December. And Polish Christmas starts, as my husband says, at first star. So I'll make a Christmas dinner, and my kids come, and Joy comes, and in fact, this year my son is bringing his fiancée because they're getting married in May, which is really exciting, and it's her first Christmas with us. And then we unwrap presents. I mean, I do a beautiful actual tree, a proper Christmas tree, green tree, to keep. I must put some more water in it, remembering that, with beautiful lights. My husband has an amazing collection of Swarovski ornaments, which we have on metal trees, and they're beautifully lit. So it's all for me about light, and bringing light into this part of the year. And of course, that comes also in other faiths. So it comes in Hindu faith as Diwali. It comes in Judaism as Hanukkah, and in many different ways, bringing light and bringing into this time of year, and also bringing something from the countryside, this tree, into your house. Hopefully, no squirrels or wildlife. That's a special thing. I love that. Yeah, I love Christmas, and also because I get to just turn off for a few days. It's just a really great downtime.
Yeah, switch off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get an ugly sweater, right?
Oh yeah, I've got one with the Grinch. Oh, that's another Christmas delicious. Watching the Grinch, the original Jim Carrey movie. Love it.
Any favorite Christmas songs?
Well, my husband puts on at the beginning of December. He puts on when we're in the car, Heart Christmas, which is, oh dear Lord. And I said, why have we got to hear why can't they vary the songs more? But then every time Wang comes on, and Last Christmas I Gave You My Heart, I'm afraid that's my favorite. But I'm also a great traditionalist about Christmas carols. So I'll always I try to vary the choirs, but King's College, Cambridge, their recordings of carols were just so unbelievably beautiful. And John Rutter did a Christmas album with my orchestra, the Britten Symphony, which unfortunately I wasn't free to play on, but orchestral carols. That's a really great disc. I do recommend it. Yeah, so I go from vomiting Christmas pop to sort of sublime Christian carols.
So no Mariah Carey for you.
Oh no, I like It's Time, which means it's Christmas. I
Defrosting.
mean, the Mariah Carey Christmas show on Apple TV is astonishing. She
Really?
does the dance of the sugar plum fairy, and she sings the celeste part 2 octaves higher than it's written in the super coloratura
Oh,
soprano register. You have to hear that. It's
oh,
just stunning.
okay. Okay. Would you rather be BFF with Beyonce or Adele?
Oh, Adele.
Oh, yeah. I knew you would say that.
Because I mean, yeah, I mean, that's like trying to choose between my children. But I have a slightly annoying thing about Beyonce, which is her vibrato. I think is this. Actually, I don't want to get litigated against. Her vibrato gets into my head after a while, and I can't stop listening to it, or even though I want to. Adele is just such a character, and I've heard some crazy things about her from people that tour with her, actually, which I probably shouldn't repeat. But she's such a creative as well, so she's writing so much of her own material, which I think is great.
Okay, thanks for taking part in that. So,
You're welcome.
coming close to the end,
Yeah.
what do you think the future holds for classical music? Do you think it's getting harder and harder for younger musicians to make their mark?
A certain sort of part of the profession, yes, I do. I think the ones that are sort of super good, like prize winning good, will always have choice. The thing is, I'm so lucky in my career to have had choice in what I do. And that's that means that I never do something I don't want to do. I'm here today because I want to talk to you. If I didn't want to talk to you, I wouldn't.
Mhm.
If I don't want to play a certain piece, I won't play it. If I don't want to do something, I won't do it. Choice is crucial to having an enjoyable life in music. But I think some of those choices are becoming limited. Some repertoire is becoming, in some ways, broader, but in many ways more narrow. So you might end up playing the same pieces a lot. And I just think we need to work to protect it. We need to work to encourage it. I feel strongly, probably more strongly about this than about any other aspect of our profession, is that we have to have every child understanding what music means, physically with their hands, with their breath, with their singing, and with reading music. And then that's a language that they deserve to be exposed to. I'm very concerned about the decrease in that in the United States to an extent, certainly in Britain. Even in Germany, it's becoming slightly less common to learn a musical instrument. That really worries me. And the thing is that it's not just that they'll be musicians. That's not what we're after, I don't think. What we're after is that people understand the language. It's a language like art, like visual art, like painting, like sculpture. I mean, this painting behind me by Laura Fair, who's a wonderful New York artist. She inspires me every day when I'm practicing. Her work is so beautiful. I have some beautiful art in my house. But if we don't understand the language of music, how can we be expected to enjoy it? And it, I mean, I have no problem with the fact that people come to classical music later in life and that they think, oh, audiences are getting older. They may be, but those people have come to classical music from a lifetime of listening to other things. Of one understanding they've got a bit more space, possibly a bit more disposable income, even though classical music is so much cheaper than popular music to attend. And it's also most of the time, slightly unfortunately, free to consume on music platforms. But another subject. I'm worried that's devaluing it. I'm worried these free platforms are devaluing our great music. Um, and there is a cultural gap between what people understand of music and what is the reality of it. But there are always going to be people such as myself and others who believe in new music and believe in encouraging composers to write. And I still see incredibly young composers coming through in this country and in America. I was working with some amazing young women composers just recently. It's been fascinating to see that coming through, and quite diverse, ethnically diverse backgrounds too. And that's incredibly good to see, because I think that's something we've all been trying to encourage more. And to see it actually happening with someone like, say, Rena Esmail is a wonderful thing to see. So I have great hope, I have great excitement about the future, but I also have worries that unless we really invest in young people, we're not going to see that carry through. It's at a kind of slightly declining point, which means it may be about to expand again. Let's see. That worries me. But young people have to be the answer. That's the thing.
There's
And it's
some
fascinating in China and Singapore and in Korea and Japan and Taiwan to see, so many great young musicians coming out of those places because the parents believe in giving them music lessons. And that's a wonderful thing. I mean, my recent tour of China was just absolutely joyous to see young people. China was China and Hong Kong and Macau, and to see young people really coming to a very high standard. A large number of my class are from the east of our world, and it doesn't make any difference to me where they come from. If they need me, I'll be there for them. But fascinated to see so many very great young Asian players coming through, and it's to me a wonderful thing. But it's because of the investment in young education and because of the belief of the parents, the tiger mums and tiger dads.
yes, tiger mums, yes, yes, certainly, yeah. So, other than music, do you have any hobbies or passion that you enjoy outside that help you find balance?
Obviously, there's my very rather disruptive cat that you've met today. I have two cats actually. One of them you won't see. One is called Crystal. She's a British Blue, and Diamond is a
Uh,
Maine Coon.
uh,
Crazy about my cats.
uh,
Visual art is a huge joy to me. So I do collect. One of my great friends is Thomas Robertello, who's the flute professor at Indiana, and he had a gallery in Chicago for a time, and I bought a lot of beautiful art from him through him. I enjoy cinema. I enjoy walking. I enjoy very much just spending time with my husband, his world, which is a different world to mine. Getting involved in his work problems, probably to his great annoyance. Yes, meditation, reading. I like a very wide variety of books, and I have that. There's a Japanese word, isn't there, for the large number of pile of books that you've got in your house that you haven't read. It's actually a word. I can't remember the word now, but I've got very much got that. Yeah. I mean, my time is so controlled and so limited because as you said, I have so many things to do. I am so happy to be, you know, wanted and needed by people. That's just a great privilege, and I'm very grateful for it, of course.
yeah, you have a great, how do you say, joy of life. I can really see
I
you're
do.
passionate
Oh,
about it.
wine. Wine is a great thing.
So, what are some upcoming projects you're excited about?
Well, the Thea Musgrave piece for oboe, violin, and large orchestra, I'm very excited about that. At the same time, I'm going to be playing a new piece for English horn and orchestra by Mark Anthony Turnage, which is very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to doing that. It's a short piece, but it's going to be very beautiful. I've got lots of new music on the boiler, not all of which I can talk about. But there is a project which I'm very excited about, which is a trio for oboe, cello, and piano from James Macmillan, Sir James Macmillan, who is, I think, one of our great composers from the UK, Scottish composer. That's been in development for a while. I just found a way to bring it into the forefront again. I've got some nice recordings to make. I've got a recording of the music of Madeline Dring coming out in May. I'm going to record the complete Britain oboe music. That's the next project I'm recording. That'll be in the autumn. actually sort of slightly off the press news as a sort of special gift to you, Joanne, is that
Oh,
I've just resigned from the Britain Sinfonia Orchestra, which I've been principal oboe for 33 years. And I resigned because I just need a better work-life balance. I'm just not. I do have a wonderful co-principal there, Peter Facer, who's a fantastic player, and he was auditioned fairly and squarely, including screened first-round auditions, and he's a wonderful player. And but I just am not there enough to call myself their principal oboe because my career is still growing, which is astonishing and wonderful. So that's slightly hot news, which I've not announced anywhere else yet. So you get an exclusive on that. It doesn't matter too much, but it's not a very big thing. But it matters to the world of orchestral chamber music in this country. So yeah, lots of exciting things: recordings, concerts, tours. I'm excited to go back to China. Actually, I'm really excited by the music vibe there right now. Yeah, going to Australia in the summer, which I'm looking forward to. New Zealand. Yeah, so lots of things on the cards, lots of flying.
oh, exciting. Because I think I first heard your interview on the double reed dish, and I think what struck me was I think your ending quote that you said that you never know where your career will take you, right? Is that
No,
what?
that's absolutely true. That's
Yeah,
absolutely true. I mean, you started this interview a little bit by saying, or there was one place in it where you said, sort of about as if I had been pointing it in a certain
yeah,
direction.
yeah.
That's never happened. I like the Louise Hay. Louise Hay is a wonderful was a wonderful metaphysical
Yeah.
teacher, and I think she's got some great truths. And one of the things is this now or something better. So anytime I've really wanted something, I have to say to myself, I want this or something better. And I want to visualize that. But I don't have a sort of creative visualization practice. I don't have a mood board. I don't have a sort of sense of where I'm going and where I'll be. And I didn't know I was going to have to retire from Britain Sinfonia, resign from Britain Sinfonia because I wouldn't have the time to do it properly. I had no idea that was going to be the case. I didn't handle that. I didn't design it. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in 5 years' time. Who does? I, I think that just continuing to be productive is a nice ambition, and to just support and encourage and make sure people know that music is a joyous thing to have as a life and a profession. And yeah, that's what I would say.
So moral of the story: stop stressing and things will just happen. Is that
To an
it?
extent, I mean, I
Yeah.
would say if you've got a door that seems to be ajar and behind it you think there might be something interesting, push that door open. Don't ignore your opportunities, to embrace them, but imagining that you need to be somewhere by a certain stage, in my own experience, is completely counterproductive, and you'll only end up either shocked that you're somewhere better or disappointed that you're not there yet. So what's the point? Let's
Ah,
see what happens. Let's take each day and each moment as it comes. Let's enjoy every second.
so enjoying
Yeah.
the process
Yeah.
of it.
Carpe diem. Exactly. Yeah.
Ah, Captain, my Captain. Okay, my final question.
Okay.
What was it like meeting the former Queen Elizabeth II?
Oh, goodness. It was amazing. I mean, she was a unique person in my experience of meeting so many wonderful people over my life. I mean, the thing is that she's so funny. She was she has a wit. And, so if you could respond to that wit with a little joke of your own, she would enjoy that. And then she'd slightly spar with you about it.
Uh,
So she said, "Yeah, but it needs a lot of puff, doesn't it?" I said, "Yes, ballast, ma'am." And she said, "Oh, it's marvelous." And I mean, she could read music. When I was first met her, Sir Peter Maxwell Davis was with us. And she said, "Oh, Max, you sit over there." And then he gave her a carrier bag, plastic carrier bag. And she said, "What's this?" He said, "It's a manuscript to my Ninth Symphony." which I've dedicated to you. She said, oh, how lovely. And so she put the carrier bag down by the side of her Chippendale chair, and she opened the score and she started reading it. She said, goodness, there's a lot of brass. Loud brass in this, Max. What's going on? And he said, oh, that's my protest against the Iraq war. She said, quite right. And so she would both tell jokes, but I would say that the abiding impression that I had of her while I was with her came after about 20 minutes of a sort of half an hour meeting. And it was that I was with a person of faith. I was with a person of spiritual relevance. I've never met the Dalai Lama, but I have a strong feeling that meeting him might be similar to what it was like being in a room with her. And it's nothing that she said, it's nothing that she did. It was something about as I gradually relaxed and calmed down from the sort of mad experience of a door opening and there's the Queen, you go, that's the Queen. You
The
go in your
heart
head,
beating,
your Queen is, your head is screaming, Queen, Queen, Queen. You walk in, you bow as you walk through the door, and then she offers you a hand, you shake her hand, you say, good morning, Your Majesty, and then after that you call her Mum. You have to remember to say Mum as in jam, not Mom as in farm, or something. I don't remember which way around it is. Anyway, when you get over that, there's, after, as I say, 20 minutes, there's this sense that you're with a spiritual leader. And that was a very calming feeling, actually, and very special. I mean, the experience. Also, she talked about, she was close to Benjamin Britten. She wrote very beautiful personal letters to him and to Walton, and she knew Elgar and all of these incredible composers, and let alone people like JFK and Winston Churchill, and some terrible people, some terrible dictators like Gaddafi, and she met all sorts of people from the
She's
different
lived through
spectrums.
everything, right? I think, yeah.
She lived through everything.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful. And then there was another time when we met, when I was at a concert, and Yu Zhao Wang, the pianist, was playing, who I'm a huge fan of. And unfortunately, as she was leaving the stage, it's quite a big audience, and the Queen was on the front row, Yu Zhao broke a heel on her shoe, and she actually fell down 2 or 3 steps and then landed right in front of the Queen. And then my friend Maxine from the London Symphony Orchestra, who was playing with her, ran and sort of helped her up, and there was this terrible shocked noise from the audience. Anyway, then I was in a lineup of about 6 of us later in a more private room. Again, incredible art, amazing art. And the Queen walked up. She said, "Did you see our soloist this evening?" And I said, "Oh, yes." She said, and then the Queen did an impersonation like this of Yu Zhao Wang walking with one broken heel. And she walks up and down in front of us doing this impersonation like this. I was laughing my head off, but I was with these rather shy, well, they were a bit shy of the Queen, these amazing women from the music business who were with me. And they didn't know whether they should laugh or not. And so I was looking at them going, like this. The Queen was looking at me, they're looking at them, trying to make them laugh. They were like, I don't know whether I should laugh or not. And it made it even funnier. And then she said, it's like that Madonna woman. Because that was when Madonna had a stage accident where she'd had a cloak pulled and it was supposed to come off and it hadn't come off and she'd fallen down some steps. And then she looked at us, she said, oh, well, I must go. And she walked off again. Like,
oh, gosh. What a story.
It's amazing. And then there's the final thing is that the day that I had that longer meeting with her, afterwards we were being walked down the stairs and we were going to a champagne reception with some very eminent people, amazing people. And there's a huge stairwell and sort of atrium at the back of Buckingham Palace, which leads out to the garden. And the charge d'affaires guy there with a million medals all over here said, oh, could you hurry up this way, please? Because Prince Philip is just about to come down. He doesn't like to see people, particularly when he's just about to leave. And I looked outside. There was a black London cab sitting outside. And I said, oh, is that his taxi? He was laughing. And he said, yeah. I said, what do you mean? As we were walking faster, he said, that is Prince Philip's taxi. He
Oh,
drives it. I said,
what?
what do you mean? Apparently, Prince Philip owned a black London cab, and he'd put on a flat cap, like a driver's cap, and drive around London, and nobody would look inside at a driver and think it was the husband of the Queen of England.
Oh, that's his getaway car.
It's a getaway car.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. I mean, every time I hear any other royal family interviewed about Prince Philip, they just say one word, which is legend. And I have to think that was probably true if that's an example of his way of dealing with the world.
Yeah, I imagine he had to take a back seat to her, right? Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah. But also he wanted to have his own life. He wanted
Yeah.
to, so he had a black cab so nobody would look at him.
That's pretty smart.
I
Very
know.
smart.
Brilliant.
Oh, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you
You
so
make
much
it
for your
so
time.
easy,
Yeah.
Jo Anne. Thank you so much for asking me.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be a part of your
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. And you ever come to this part of the world, please let me know.
I will be there and I will
Yeah.
let you know. I
Yeah.
will indeed, yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.